All right, according to my computer, it says I'm live. So let's see who's out there. If you are new, welcome to the Jelly Roll Club. This is a live stream where we are completing a UFO, which is an unfinished object that we started last year. It was a project that we started towards the second half of the year, so it's spilling over into 2023, but I'm excited to get it done. So if you are new, you're going to want to go back to the beginning of the series and watch all the other videos before you get to this one. But join us anyway. Today I'm going to be focusing on free motion quilting because that is one of my favorite ways to finish. I'm also going to be using a quilt as you go method to put my back together because it's easier than hurting your back and shoulders trying to quilt a giant quilt. So that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about. And I'm going to be showing you my entire plan for finishing this top. And then we also have several other meetings. So we will meet again via live stream. And we have one in March in which we will build stems to finish up our flowers. So today we're going to build the background. In March, we're going to add stems and leaves. So we're going to be talking about that today as well so that you can get kind of a head start. In April, on April Fool's Day, we're going to be adding bugs to our quilt. So I'm going to show you how to create ladybugs and butterflies with your Dresden templates. And then last but not least, we're going to do the grand finale on May the 6th. I'm going to reveal the entire top finished with all of its little bits and pieces, including buttons and fancy threads and all of the stuff that's going to be going on this quilt. So if you guys are ready to join me in this finishing journey, let's get started. All right, before we begin, go ahead and tell me where you're from. You just drop your name in the chat so that I know where you're watching from. I love saying hi to everybody, so let's see who's out there. We've got friends from South Carolina. We've got people from Phoenix, Arizona. Hi, Carolyn. Dark Dragon, your name is so fancy. We have BB Binder, so let's get started. We've got about 30 people out there, so it's time for us to begin. All right, so I'm going to switch camera views so you can see what's going on. And so the first thing that I want you to know is that I have a handout that you should have downloaded. The link has been pinned, so if you see this, you can also find it at the very bottom of the www.jellyrollclub.com page. I've put it there. But what I've done is a handout that says, let's make a background. Oh, look at everybody. Hi, friends. So that's what you have here. And in your background, let me see if I can make this clearer. Let's see if yeah, it's auto-focusing. So it says you have to have enough scraps to build a 60 by 60 background. If you don't have enough scraps to build a 60 by 60 background, you most certainly can buy just a single piece of fabric if you want to free motion quilt the entire back. But I'm going to be using pieces that are 20 by 20 to build this 60 by 60 background. And so let me just talk about that. So that's the first thing. You have to have that. The next thing that I want you to have is I need you to have at least a yard of green batik for stems. And the reason why I like batiks is because they really quilt up nicely, especially if you're doing raw edge applique. So this is a traditional quilting cotton. This is from Moda. And this is a nice green, like a green gray. But these are batiks, and batiks are the same on both sides. And they are some of my favorite fabrics to sew with. So I've picked a couple of batiks out of my sewing room that I'm going to be building stems with. I may add this green to this one for some of my leaves, but I'm definitely going to be using some of these colors. Some of my stems may be lighter than the others, so if I can't find a batik that I like that's limey green, I'm probably going to use this grunge, but I also have this batik here that I could use in the quilt, and I certainly have a whole host of other quilting cottons in my sewing room that I could use. For my grass, I'm going to be using this print here because it has little flowers that look like some of the flowers. So I'm going to be cutting this to make my grass that goes across the bottom. So this is what I'm going to be using for my leaves and stems. A lot of greens here. Mostly batiks, but a few quilting cottons. So just grab what you have. Don't go out and buy a ton of stuff. Just find stuff that kind of looks like it has good texture or a print on it and go crazy. Who cares? This is going to be a fun, scrappy quilt. So these are all the greens that I picked out. Also, if you have scraps, you know, we all have those little scrap bags of leftovers. I have a few like chartreuse greens in there that I may probably pull out. And so don't be afraid to use scraps or whatever you have laying around in your sewing room. Don't feel like you need to go out and buy a ton of fabric for finishing up this project, okay? All right, so let's get started. So you have that, right? You need enough scraps for that 60 by 60. You need all of the green batiks that you can get your hands on, a total of 1 yard. I need 1/4 yard of green scraps for leaves. And then I'm going to use at least 1/4 yard worth of scraps for grass. And that's 1/4 yard by width of fabric, which is like 9 inches by like 40 inches. Then I'm going to have scraps of red, yellow, black, brown, green to add some finishes to my border. And then I'm going to use either Elmer's washable glue, or you can use a little bit of Aleene's tacky glue to adhere your flowers to your quilted background to kind of anchor them in place before you stitch around either with your sewing machine or by hand. So you decide how you're going to anchor those, but I like to use washable school glue. I also like it for basting. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to make a plan for how I'm going to quilt my background, right? So in your handout, you should have some leaves like this. So this is the sunflower leaf template, right? And this is from the sunflower month 4. So I saved that. I also added these leaves to this handout for this month. And it has these hand-drawn leaves on here. And I drew one and then I shrank it down so that if your flowers are different sizes, you have leaves in different sizes. This serves 2 purposes. This can be a quilting template and it can also be a leaf template. So I'm going to show you how to use those here in just a little bit. Last but not least, I have a free motion quilting design and it's a continuous design. So for example, if I were stitching this out, I would start here, move up, stop my machine, pivot and come down. I could go all the way around and stop here, right? Or I could come in here where this dot is, come in, go right here, go all the way out, and then come down my stem. So this is actually something that you could use to practice free motion quilting. These are embroidered leaf designs because in the end, I'm going to add a few vines to around my flowers, and I'm probably going to embroider those with just some embroidery floss. I'm going to be using variegated thread on my stems. So I bought this green so that I can stitch all my stems and my leaves with this variegated green. But for my background, I'm going to be using mostly blue thread because my background is going to be a dark blue. I've also added optional grass. So if you want to cut grass pieces to put across the bottom where your stems end up at the bottom of your quilt, that would be great. I decided to make a few applique dandelions as well, so I'm going to be adding some optional dandelions because my garden might have a few weeds. All of my gardens have a few weeds from time to time. Then I also added these Dresden templates to this handout. They were in a separate handout, but in case you want to make extra flowers, I added these templates in case you're needing to make those. I'm also going to use this little daisy that was in month 7 that said the Daisey because I'm going to be actually appliquing some smaller daisies and I'm going to cut them out of a single piece of fabric, okay? And so here we go. So the first thing that I want to talk about is this entire background. So my quilt is going to be 60 inches, right? I'm going to include a border, which means that these are going to end up a little bit smaller than 60 inches. So mine are going to be actually 18 finished because I'm going to use a quilt as you go method. So I need a border around each of these. That means that when I'm actually done, I'm going to be 18 inches finished, which means I'm going to have to do a little bit of a border around here. So the first thing that I did, and let me just kind of show you what I have. So the first thing that I did in my sewing room, can you guys still hear me? Is I took my design board back here and I pinned 9 of these 20 by 20 blocks. I had different colors of blue, right? I pinned 9 of those 20 by 20 blocks, and I kind of laid out all of my Dresdens that I made, all my big ones, right? And I kind of decided that I really liked how they look against that navy blue. So my decision was, instead of doing a light background, that I was going to do my Dresdens against a nice deep navy, because I think that that will show off all those Dresden flowers a whole lot better. So it's kind of a night sky. That's the look I'm going for. You can make yours any way you want, and let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to pull up some pictures, and I'm going to show you what some other people have done with their Dresden flower garden quilts. So let me pull these up. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my camera view, and then I'm going to pull some quilts for you to look at. So I'm going to load some designs for you to look at. So this first one is a really fun looking quilt. So what they did with theirs, this is called inspiration quilts, right? And so I went to Pinterest and I just found all of the quilts I could find. And look at this gorgeous quilt. They took their Dresdens, they did a scrappy background. That quilt is not very big. It's like 48 by 48. And what they did is they put just a small handful of Dresdens. They did 4 bigger ones that were 12 inches across, and they did some smaller ones that were like 6.5 and 8 inches. And then they just did some vines from the top to the bottom. They did a scrappy border, and they did a scrappy light background. So I love how that looks. So if that's the look you're going for, I think that's really pretty. So that's inspiration piece number 1. I really like what they did. It's not too fussy, but the vining is very simple. So if you're kind of a new quilter, this one is actually probably very doable for you because it's not huge either. So that's very, very pretty. I'm going to remove that one, and I'm going to add a different one now so that you can see a different one. So we're just going to go through an inspiration gallery really quick so that you can see kind of where I'm going. Here's another inspiration gallery. This one is a little bit more busy. And so in this case, they took all of their blacks and kind of grays, and they put a bunch of Dresdens and they overlapped them. So this is more kind of like abstract art, and that's very pretty. So if that's what you like, you can make a bunch of Dresdens and you can chop some of them in half and just kind of put your Dresdens together. So you're the designer of your quilt. So you decide how you want it to look at the end. I give you the tools and the ideas, and then you take it and make it your own. So don't feel like you have to do what I'm doing. But I do like the scrappiness of the first one. I agree, Rebecca. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to remove this one, and now I'm going to show you another one. So perhaps your background is going to be light, and that's the kind of quilt that you want. So I'm going to add one. And so in this case, they took a bunch of horizontal scraps, and they added their Dresdens, and they put them on a background of something that looks like sky and then maybe grass. So as you can see in that one, they put white on every other Dresden blade, and they put all of their scraps horizontally. They quilted the entire back, and then they attached the Dresdens to that background. So that one looks really fun too. So there's no limit to what you can do with this quilt, really. So this one is beautiful. I think the first one was lovely. The second one was very interesting. And I think this one looks really fresh. It would look fun in a little girl's room. Heck, it would look cute in my room. So that's another idea. I'm going to show you one more, and then we're going to get busy on some free motion quilting, okay? So now let's look at the next one that I wanted to show you. And I love going to Pinterest. You can get sucked into Pinterest really quick, friends, and you could spend hours of your life. So I'm going to add 2 different quilts right now, one in the corner like this, so you can see that one. So this one has a lot of stuff going on, right? A lot of vines, a lot of buds. Do you see that one? That one's quite interesting, and they did blue on the background. So I like how they did these smaller Dresden plate buds on this one. So the Dresden plate is a quilt that really doesn't have a lot of limits. Most people think Dresden plate and they think of their granny's or great granny's quilt that just had a grid with all the Dresden plates in little rows, right? They don't see the Dresden plate as having so many choices, but Dresdens are very fun. So here's another one. I like how they did this one. They did multi-layered Dresdens like I did in one of the months that I showed you guys. And so they did several. And I love how bright that quilt is. Very happy. It's on a navy background. And so that's one of the ones that was my inspiration piece. All right, I'm going to get that one out of here. And then I'm going to show you just one more. I said I was going to do one, but let's do one more. All right, and last but not least, I'm going to show you this fun quilt that you could do. So if you wanted to do a Dresden like this one, you could do this one. And so as you can see, that one has a background and they used every kind of scrap that they had. And look at that. So scrappiness is happiness from that one, right? So this one, they just did horizontal layers. They're not even super straight and it doesn't really matter. And so then they went through and they quilted their entire background and then they put all of the Dresdens on top with some vines that kind of go in every direction. So they just used a few stems. They didn't put any leaves, but it looks fun just the same. All right, so that's enough of all the inspiration stuff. If you want to see more inspiration quilts, I put them on the website. So if you want to go there, there's plenty things for you to look at. And what I'm going to do, if you want to look at some, is I'm going to drop that in the chat. So I'm going to drop that link to the website. So if you are new and you have not started this project, the website is www.jellyrollclub.com. That's my Google Sites page. And what you're going to see is the Dresden project. And it has the old videos, the old handouts, and it also has a huge inspiration gallery full of videos. So take a Dresden and see what you do with it. All right, friends, let's get this quilt finished. So the first thing that I told you is that I'm going to make a giant quilt, and I broke mine into a grid of 9. Each of these are going to be, I'm going to start with 9 pieces that are 20 inches to give myself a 60 by 60. I know that I'm going to need a little bit of a border, and this is my reminder that I have to design a border, so I'm going to do that at the end. But I'm going to start by laying out my blocks. The first block that I want to lay out is going to be my sunflower, because my sunflower is going to be the sun in my quilt. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lay it out where it's going to go. So it's going to go here in my quilt. So my sun is going to be here, and that's going to be my sunflower. So I'm just going to sketch just to kind of give me an idea of where I'm going to put that one. Each of these is going to get quilted individually. And so I want my sun to have rays coming out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quilt rays of sun coming out of this particular block in every direction. So that's going to be my quilting plan for this particular one. And this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to quilt this entire block, and then I'm going to anchor my sun, but I'm going to not use any stems, and then I'm going to move on to this block here where I'm going to quilt the entire block, and then I'm going to attach my flowers. So let me show you what my plan is. So I'm going to use a lot of my big blocks, and I'm going to use my bigger flowers kind of in this middle area. So I know that I have, if you look behind me, I know that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kind of large Dresdens. I have those partial Dresdens that I'm going to be incorporating, that layered Dresden. I have a small Dresden over there that I'm probably going to add another layer to. And then I have my California Poppy, my Daisy, and my other stuff. And so I'm definitely going to be putting the bulk of my flowers in the middle of my quilt. So I know that I have a spot here, so I'm going to put maybe my cone flowers over here, and those are my partials, so I know that I'm going to put those there. And I definitely want a larger one, so maybe I'll put my rainbow layer, so I'll just put rainbow. And what you're noticing is that some of these are going to be overlapping, and that's okay, because that just means that when I build this section, I'm going to build it in 4, and then I'm going to attach. So that means that my quilt is going to be laid out like this. I'm going to have to attach this section to this one. I'm going to attach this section as one unit. So I'm just kind of building my plan here. And I'm probably going to attach, so it'll make it easier on me. I'm going to attach these two together, this one by itself, and then this one as a quadrant to make it easier for me to work with all of these bits. So this is how I'm going to join mine. So I'm going to build these four together. I'm going to build this segment over here, and then I'm going to build this as 2 units going across the top. All right, so let's get started building this unit. So this is the one that I'm going to build tonight, and then all of my other units will be built exactly the same way. I wanted rays of sun to come off of there. So I know that that's going to be my quilting plan. What am I going to do over here? Since this is a starry sky, I'm probably going to do horizontal swirls that go like this to kind of resemble the wind, right? So I know that this is what I'm going to be doing with this one. So this is a windy, kind of a wintry night. And so I know that when I quilt, this is how I want to quilt it. I want to put some big swoopy designs like this. This down here is not as windy, down here closer to the ground. And so I may just add a few of these leaves. So if you saw in my handout, I had some leaves. So what I'll probably do to this bottom part is I will probably add some leaves, and I might use a little bit of variegated green to kind of give my background some texture. And let me show you what I mean. So as I put my Dresdens right here, here's going to be my rainbow Dresden. Here's going to be my cone flowers. I'm probably going to do my California poppy somewhere over here because it's a large one. So I'm going to do my big California poppy. So I'll do California poppy. And then I'm going to, I have the rainbow one, the daisy, and the layered. So I have the rainbow, the layered, and the daisy. So I'm going to use those there. And so then down here where I have the bottom, I'm going to be adding some smaller flowers like some of these. So I'm just going to put this to kind of remind me that some of mine are going to be smaller ones that I'm going to build and put in there. The next thing that I want is kind of my plan for where I'm going to put some stems. And so I'm going to put some stems like this, and I'm going to be adding leaves. Some medium leaves, some smaller leaves, and some bigger leaves. So this is just kind of my plan, right, of what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a big stem for that California poppy, and then I'm going to build some stems for these smaller flowers. And so that means that in this area down here, the way I'm going to quilt it is I'm going to do some quilting that looks like grass down here at the bottom, just like that. And then I'm going to quilt some leaves down in here. So I'm going to add leaves. And so this is my reminder. I'm going to put some notes that I want leaves in there. And so now I have my plan of how I'm going to finish this quilt, right? It's a little bit off center, which I like. The sun is over here, and then my other flowers are kind of in this direction. And so this is my quilting and layout plan for what I'm going to do next, okay? All right, so let's get sewing. These I'm going to save, and I'm going to show you these next month. So these are March the 4th. You're going to like this. All right. Does anybody have any questions so far about what I have shared about this plan? So this is now my quilt plan, and this is Dresden project, so that when I set it down and put it in my box, this is plan A. I might think about it and change my mind, but I'm just going to go with it. All right. So let's get started preparing my first square, which is this one. So the first thing that I did before I went online is I have 2 sides. So if you notice, this is the back side, and this is actually pieced. Look, pieced, and I opened that seam and made it nice and flat. So I pieced that side, that's the back side. And I'm going to be using this as my front side. So this is the front. Let me show you what I did. So this piece measures a little bit more than 20 inches. I took my marking tool, and you're going to love my fancy marking tool. It's a Crayola crayon, and I just kind of marked it. I took a ruler and I marked that border because I'm not going to quilt within about a ½ inch of that, because when you do a quilt as you go, you have to leave enough fabric for you to sew these pieces together. And so when I get ready to sew this, I'm going to be trimming some of this batting and leaving some of the backing and some of the front, because that's how I'm going to sew these blocks together. Okay? The pattern for this is a pattern I created, so you can get that at www.jellyrollclub.com. So that's where this pattern comes from. Ovidia Adams, that was your question. Anybody else have any questions? All right, so here is my 20 by 20 block. What I did is I have some backing, right? This is 100% cotton batting. It's not super thick. It's warm and white, so it's just something that you can get at most quilt shops or online. And now I'm going to baste it with a little bit of a glue stick. So I'm just going to roll this back. If it's pressed together, it usually sticks pretty well, but I'm just going to give it a couple of dabs with my glue stick, not a lot. Just going to give it a couple of dabs with a glue stick. And I'm just going to smash it together. And that's enough to hold it in place. And I'm just going to smooth that. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of roll the other stuff back just a little bit. Just kind of roll it back. And I'm going to give it a couple of more dabs of this glue stick. And if you work with washable glue, it leaves no residue on your quilt. It doesn't stain your fabric. It doesn't leave a mess. And that's one of the reasons why I love basting with a little bit of glue. And so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to smooth that. I have one more little section to do at the bottom. Like I said, you don't have to do very much, just very little bit of washable glue. It has no fumes. And it washes right out and it doesn't stain, which is why it's one of my favorite ways to baste when you quilt as you go. All right, so I have smoothed that completely. I'm going to show you that. So it is completely smooth, right? As you can see, I have the backing attached. There are no pins, but it's nice and pressed flat. And I even have it pieced. It's okay if your backing is pieced. And so this is ready to go. You see that? I've got it all the way around. So this piece is ready for the next step. All right, the next step is I'm going to decide where my Dresden flower is going to go. So that's kind of right here. Let me move my keyboard. And I'm going to draw with a pencil. Nothing but a child's, it says My First Ticonderoga pencil. So this is a child's pencil. And I'm going to draw myself a few lines of where I want this to end up. So this is going to end up kind of like this. And so I'm just going to take and I'm going to draw a few lines like this just to kind of let me know where my quilting lines are going to be. And it's not a lot, but it's enough for me to see where I'm going to be quilting. Okay? And I'm going to be quilting out here from this sun out to the outsides. I might take and I'm going to go ahead and mark a few little marks right here just so that I know where my sun is going to end up when I get ready to attach it. So this is just a crayon and I'm marking it in places where you're not going to see it. I suggest that whatever marking tools you use, that you test them to make sure that they're going to come out, okay? So make sure that they're going to come out. All right, so now that I have my sun ready to go, I'm ready for the next step. And don't be afraid. Quilt as you go is super easy. Super, super easy. So let me show you what's going to happen next. So I've got my other camera set up over here, and let me show you my setup for for free motion quilting, okay? All right, friends. So what I did over here, just so you can see, is I dropped, this is my little gidget table. I dropped my sewing machine down into this gidget table, and it has like a little lever that raises and lowers. This was not an expensive table, but I wanted it to be flush. And it's okay that it has a little opening here. It's not a big deal. But I have my feed dogs dropped. You can do this with any domestic machine. You don't have to have a big fancy machine. This one only straight stitches. It doesn't have fancy stitches. And I've got my darning foot. If you notice that, can you see that? I have just my darning foot in there. Nothing else. And then I've got this set up so that it's flush right here. And I can move my pieces with both of my hands. And so let me show you what I'm going to do. So the next thing that I'm going to do is take my handy dandy cling wrap, this press and seal, and I'm going to put a little bit of press and seal on my machine bed. And why do I do that? Here, let me move my other so you can see. So let me show you with my other camera. So can you see that? You can see my camera right there, right? I'm going to take my press and seal and I'm going to open it. And I'm going to put that on there because it allows the piece of fabric to slide on the bed of my machine. So see where I have this right here? And I have kind of this gap. I'm just going to take this and I'm going to put a little bit of press and seal so that my fabric will slide and not get hung up on those edges. I'm just going to push that down. If you have any residue left over from your press and seal, you can always take a little bit of sewing machine oil and remove it. So I just put a little press and seal across that gap. It also allows my hands to slide around easier, so I just put a little bit of press and seal there. And so now this makes it easier for my stuff to kind of slide around. So just press it, press, press, press. And get any air bubbles out of your press and seal. So don't be afraid. You can also use cling wrap. But I just want to give myself a slidey surface. Okay? So I have my machine flush. I have my slidey surface. My feed dogs are dropped. And I'm going to switch to this camera so you can see my hands better. All right. I'm going to start quilting. Kind of where this Dresden plate where I marked, from this section and going out, then I'm going to come in and I'm going to go out. But I'm going to put something on my fingers so that they will grip this fabric better. So I have my sandwich, right? My 3 layers. I've got a little bit of glue base to hold it down, not a lot. And now I'm going to put something on my fingers to help me grip this. You can use just about anything on your quilt, but one of the things that I love to use on my quilt is literally just some of this grippy tape for your fingers. Let me grab mine. All right. So grippy tape is something that you can use just like this. And you can put a little bit of grippy stuff on your fingers. So just grab a little bit, break it off. This stuff sticks to itself. You know the stuff that nurses use when you have boo-boos? You get a little bit of this grippy tape and you put some on the ends of your fingers. So I'm going to put it on my middle finger. Just like this. I'm going to wrap it. Because that's kind of rubbery and grippy. I'm going to stick it on my fingers. And I can still use these fingers for other stuff. But it'll help me to grip my, my fabric better. So I'm going to put this on my middle fingers. Just like this. It's just a little bit of grippy tape, not a lot. If you want, you can also put it on your ring finger. If you notice, I'm not wearing nail polish because when I do this grippy stuff. And so you can just use a little bit of this grippy stuff. It's not very expensive. And I just put it on my fingers, okay? And that'll allow me to grab the fabric. I'm sitting so that where I'm kind of even with the surface, and I'm not going to shrug my shoulders too much because I don't want to strain my neck. So feed dogs down. Let me move things out of my way. And so I'm going to be putting on my glasses. Okay. There is no stitch regulation on this machine, so that means that I'm just going to be relying on the speed of my hands and the speed of my that I control with my foot pedal to determine the length of my stitches, right? The faster I go, the smaller my stitches. The slower I go, the bigger my stitches. So you're just going to have to practice until you get to where you can make stitches that you like. And that takes time, so don't panic if you're not perfect. I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to pull the stuff underneath. I'm going to drop this in. Here, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to bring my thread from the bobbin up. And I need a little something to fish it out of there. So I'm going to use just a scissors. I'm going to tease it out. And so what I'm doing is I'm bringing my bobbin thread up. Okay? Because you want both pieces of thread on the same side, your bobbin thread and your top thread. All right. So I have both pieces of thread. Drop this down. I have my darning foot, feed dogs are down, and now I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to sew in a space no bigger than maybe 6 by 6 because that's about all that I can control with my hands, okay? Let me just bring this over here so it's, can you guys see close enough now? All right. How about I turn my machine on, huh? You know what I did before I started? I unplugged my machine, so guess what I need to do? Plug this in. Live TV. All right, my machine is on, so that really helps. Power helps. Can you guys see my hands out of the way? All right, so now that I have both pieces, I'm going to hold them tightly. I'm going to move them out of my way and take a couple of stitches, right, just to kind of anchor that. So a couple of stitches in place. Now I'm going to move this out of my way. I'm going to trim those at the end and I'm going to get started. So now I'm going to go right here and I'm just going to come outward like this. The needle that I put in here is a fresh needle and it is a Microtex, for those of you who are wondering what size needle I use, which has a very sharp point and it's an 80-12. You can also use a different size needle, but this is the needle that I put in there. It's a Microtex, right? And this one is an 80-12, but you can also use a 90. So this is the needle that I'm using. So I started with a fresh needle before I got started, and now I'm ready to go. All right. So this one's going to take me a minute, right? And the faster you go, I'm going to travel. And then I'm going to come back because I'm doing big rays of sun, right? I'm doing kind of wavy. And I'm going to move the fabric, not my hands. Your hands will only go so far. So you're always going to want to move the fabric, not your hands. There we go. So I'm going out, close to that edge, out there. I'm going to travel a little bit to the side. And then I'm going to come back in like this, and I'm just moving my hands. And I'm just working at a pace that enables me to create what I want to create. If you notice, I'm not worried about what I'm quilting in this middle section too much because I'm going to come back and I'm going to do a circle and I'm going to quilt this. When I attach this sun to this top, I'm going to quilt in a circle and I will quilt the middle section of this. So I'm not too worried about quilting in this area. Mainly, I want to quilt everything that's going to be on the outside of this sun. And so I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to turn. And then I'm going to sew out to the edge like this. And I'm literally quilting just the pattern of a giant sun. And this press and seal is getting on my nerves because it's bunching, it's not sticky. So I'm going to get rid of it and I'm going to keep sewing. You can also wax the bed of your machine with regular furniture polish. Sometimes I put a little bit of furniture polish and it makes it slippery. But anything that you have like that also works. Okay. So then I'm going to come this way. And I'm going to be just making a big, ginormous sun going all the way out to the outside. If you notice, I'm walking my hands. And so I'm trying to just keep a steady and consistent, just a steady and consistent pace so that my stitches just look as even as possible. But yeah, you can use cling wrap, you can use press and seal, anything to make the bed where your machine is sitting just a little bit more slippery. They sell fancy silicone pads for your sewing machine that you can free motion quilt, but none of that is necessary. I have a super slider downstairs that I bought, but it's not necessary. Does anybody have any questions while I'm stopping for a second? Yes, the Supreme slider is very expensive. I have one, and cling wrap works just as well. If you want to kind of tape the edges to keep it from coming up, you can do that. I probably have a little bit of sewing machine oil on this table where I was cleaning my machine earlier, and so it was not wanting to stick as much as it normally does. There you go. And so look, I'm just going to be literally sewing all the way out to that edge, and then I'm coming in. And if you notice, I'm walking with my hands and I'm moving my hands frequently. You have to really kind of exercise your shoulders too and relax. So just so you can see from the side. If you notice, I'm not holding my shoulders like this because you'll get a neck strain. So your arms should be out kind of parallel with your body. And you're moving like this. You're going to stop with the needle down if your machine has that function, and you're going to move it. You're going to want to keep your hands flat and just kind of smooth your fabric as you work. I like kind of a medium pace, not too fast, not too slow. And then I adjust my fabric and then I go back out. So I'm just sewing from the middle to the outside. If you notice, I'm going from the center out like this on my piece. You can also do this with your walking foot. If you're scared to do free motion quilting, you can certainly do this with your walking foot. Nothing wrong with that at all. I'm just trying to practice my free motion quilting, so that's how I'm doing mine. I'm going to go really fast so you can see what the stitches look like when I go really fast, and then I'm going to go a little bit slower. So I'm going to go out like this. All right, whenever you're free motion quilting, be sure to take a break, right? Because your shoulders can get stiff where you kind of get like this, but kind of roll your shoulders back because otherwise you're going to end up with a strained neck and shoulders that hurt. Never sew for hours on end when you're free motion quilting. That's way too hard on your back. Unless you're like one of those bodybuilders that has great big strong shoulders, I don't recommend it. So I usually take breaks when I'm doing this because it's really good for your body to just take breaks. And here I am. Let me switch the camera so you can see where I'm working. And so now you see that I've been going out. I have finished this entire section and I've made it about 1/4 of the way on this quilt block, okay? Make sure you start with a full bobbin so that you're not playing bobbin chicken when you're free motion quilting. If you notice, I keep my hands pretty tight, kind of like this, right? And I keep them pretty tight, and then I just walk them back like this when I need to move them. But always smooth as you go, and then check your back. Make sure you don't have any puckers. Free motion quilting is literally just practice. It's not very hard at all. You can do this with a vintage machine. You can free motion quilt with a treadle. You can do it with a fancy sewing machine, or you can do it with a simple straight stitcher like I have. When I'm holding it, I'm kind of pressing outward to keep it really smooth and flat. All right, so I have done more than 1/4 of this. And then I'm going to stop and see if you guys have any questions, because it's already 9:46. So what questions do you guys have? Let me pull this so I can show you guys my work. All right, so as you can see, right, I've been quilting from the center out, and I'm just doing wavy stitches. I chose to do a navy front and a navy back because if I have boo-boos, it's not going to be extremely obvious. Yes, bob and chicken is not my favorite game to play. So you do not want to play bob and chicken when you're doing this. And so let me show you. So you can see the stitches, right? And they look pretty consistent. That's the main thing with free motion quilting. And then if you see the back, I don't have any stitches that are looking loopy. I'm not having any problems with my tension. I do have a little bit of lint from my machine where I cleaned it earlier, but it's looking pretty good, and I'm happy with those stitches. You see those stitches? No eyelashes, because I'm taking it slow when I'm going around these corners, right? So look at those stitches, nice and consistent. And so there you have it. I'm going to quilt this entire thing, except for this section where I kind of drew with my crayon. So I'm going to just kind of draw it so you can see it a little bit, because that's the inside of my flower. And the reason I'm not going to stitch too much in here, I'm going to come in about 1 inch, is because when I attach this flower, I'm going to sew a big spiral in the center of this and then attach the outside. All right, what happens next is I will roll this back. If you notice, I did not quilt beyond that. I'm going to roll this back, and I'm going to trim it just like that. I'm going to leave this back right here, and I'm going to trim about half of that off, because I'm going to use the quilt as you go method that does not use sashing. So that's what I'm going to be doing. What size thread am I using for quilting? I am using regular 50 weight quilting cotton. And I'm using, actually, it's one that I bought for my long arm, but it's just straight here, and I'm going to trim this. I'm using a signature thread by Superior Thread, so I'm using a cone. And this is just that goes in my other sewing machines as well. So this is just kind of cone thread that's specifically for quilting, and it's 100% cotton. Okay. The name of my table is just a Gidget table, and you can get them online. I think I paid with a coupon, because I used a 50% coupon for mine a million years ago. I paid like $90. I think they're about $200 now. You'll have to shop around, but the center of this table just kind of drops. It's like a little folding table, and the center just kind of drops down and allows me, do you see down here? It has a little thing that allows me to drop my machine, and I can just lift it if I want. So I can lift my machine higher or lower and drop it down. But you don't have to have expensive equipment. You can even make a bed for your table using foam core. So if you really want to do it, it's not a problem. But now that I am done with my plan, this is what I'm going to be doing. So for the next 4 weeks, until we meet again, I'm going to be quilting all of these pieces and putting them together before the next session next month. I'm going to be posting pictures of my progress, and I might even post a couple of update videos. So if you want to meet with me in the sewing room. Do you guys know where the group sewing room is? So if you go to Facebook, if you have Facebook, we are going to be able to open what's called a Facebook meeting room, and I have a link in there, and it's the same link. So if you have questions, you can meet me in there. It says machine quilt the petals or hand quilt the petals. I'm going to be machine quilting this entire quilt. I'm not going to be hand quilting anything. I might kind of tack down some of my Dresdens by hand, but I doubt it. I think I'm really just going to machine the entire thing. So I'm going to be doing it quilt as you go because I think 20-inch units are nice, or a nice size for you to practice machine quilting. I'm just going to finish this one tonight. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do the rest of my rays of sun. And I think this just makes it easier. See how nice it gives it texture? And so it kind of looks like rays of the sun coming off of that. And so you practice whatever you want to practice. If you want to do the entire top and then quilt the whole thing and then attach your Dresdens, you can. If you want to do sashing on yours and put the Dresdens in the middle, you can do it that way. But this is how I'm doing it, and I'm going to be having another video where I'm going to show you exactly how to join these panels once they're all completely quilted. All right, friends, if you have any questions, please drop them down in the chat. Please give this video a thumbs up when we're done. If you are not a subscriber, please subscribe, because in the community section of this YouTube channel, I always post pictures of what is happening. So you can see what's going on. I post dates and other things. If you miss something, you can just look in the community tab and see what's happening. All right, friends, it is 9:52. It is getting late on a Saturday night. I'm going to slide over to the Facebook meeting group, and I'm going to open the Facebook video chat if you guys want to get in there and ask me any questions. My question is, it looks like you're quilting over quilting. I'm not sure. You mean I'm going to be quilting over some of the quilting? Yes. And that's why I'm doing navy on the back and navy on the front, because it's not going to be so obvious. And yes, I'm going to be doing quilting over the quilting. So when I attach the flower, it just fell on the floor. So when I attach this flower, I'm going to be sewing it on here, and I'm going to be quilting around that, and then just sewing a straight stitch all the way around that. Okay? So yes, I'm going to be quilting over this area when I quilt the middle. So like I said, I'm probably going to attach the middle, sew this by machine, and then come through and kind of hand tack this, because this for me is going to be an art quilt. It's not going to be a bed quilt. Okay? All right, everybody. That's the end of this session. Think about what you're going to do. Build yourself a plan. If you have questions, drop them in the comments section, and I will answer all of your questions. All right, friends, 9:53. I'm going to get off of here. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to be sewing tonight, probably until midnight, and I'm going to be in the video chat room. All right, everybody, you guys have a wonderful night, okay? I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye. See you in a month for the rest of the Dresden. Bye, everybody.